Hello, my name's Andy Tidy and welcome back to another episode of Canal Hunter Series 7. In the last 3 episodes we have navigated the lost backdoor route into the BCN, and that involved travelling up the Hatherton Branch Canal, the Churchbridge Locks and then the lost section of the Cannock Extension Canal. Well, we have finally returned to the surviving portion of the Cannock Extension Canal, the mile which comes directly north from Pelsall Common out to the A5, where the canal was blocked off in 1962. You know, looking back on this series, and indeed the 6 series which preceded it, the weakness in my relentless search for the history of these forgotten waterways is that it's quite possible to get lost in the detail, and you kind of just lose sight of the big picture. Well, our progress to date has brought us here to the site of the Grove Colliery, or Whirly Grove to give it its proper title. It was part of the extensive Brownhills Colliery network. And I'm going to take a look at the site in a little bit more detail in a moment. But before I do, I want to use this central location to illustrate just how extensive this Cannock Coalfield was, and how the canal network of the area integrated into it and facilitated the removal of millions and millions of tons of coal. One area to the north of Birmingham and the Black Country effectively powered the Industrial Revolution and the surge of industry in this area for the better part of a century. Now, in an ideal world, I would climb to the top of a small hill or indeed a colliery waste tip and survey the panorama and show you what lies out there. But of course there is no spoil tips left, there is no hill in the area. But what of course we do have is the drone that can fly up to its legal maximum operating height of 400 feet and do a 360-degree pirouette, and I can tell you where all the collieries used to be. So that's what we're going to do. If I'm honest with you, this is going to sound like a roll call of the who's who of the local collieries and the local canal network. But I hope you enjoy this overview of the Cannock Coalfield taken in one long lingering glance. Well, we've reached our maximum operating height of 400 feet and we're looking out to the northwest, back the way we've come. And we're going to survey this scene in a clockwise direction. First of all, we're now looking out directly towards the hotel and the site of the Churchbridge Locks. And to the left of the screen, there's Cheslin Hay. It fed coal down the tramways to the Walkmill or the Hawkins Basin. And then as you come around, there was the Rumour Hill Colliery. Nestling in that little hole in the hills, there is the Hensford Basin and the East Cannock Colliery. And looking due north along the line of the Cannock Extension Canal, towards the left on the horizon, it was the Littleworth Colliery. That was connected into the Hensford Basin via the BCN tramway. And then just a little bit around to the right of the canal, just where that mass of white buildings in the centre of the screen is, that was the Conduit Colliery, or Conduit Collieries Pitheads number 3 and later. Looking out beyond Chasewater Reservoir, you can see the Cannock Chase Colliery, connected into the rest of the coalfield using a mineral railway. And then as we come around to the dam wall of Chasewater, you have the site of the Marquee Colliery, and that marks the start of the Anglesey branch. We're coming round into the Brownhills area, and all of these trees you can see were the old site of the Conduit number 1 and number 2 pits and Jerome pit. And looking out towards the southwest, you're looking out towards the area of Walsall Wood. And then beyond it, on the ridge in the distance, there's Aldridge, scene of another 4 collieries. As we look due south, you can see the city of Birmingham, and we're looking out across the Pelsall coalfields. There's the line of the Cannock Extension Canal ending up on Pelsall Common. We're now deep into the Worley and Essington territory, and we're looking out towards Bloxwich. You can see the 2 tower blocks coming into view, and the land between here and there was the site of the Fishley Colliery. That was served by the Lord's Hay branch. And finally, as we're coming back out into open countryside, we're looking over the Norton Cannock and the Great Worley collieries. These are the collieries which were served by the Worley Bank branch above Sneed Locks, and also by that tramway across into the Hatherton Branch Canal. Well, as you can see, here at Grove we are literally encircled by the Cannock Coalfield collieries. And there were many more which were linked by the tramways and the mineral railways. These collieries were generally set about a mile apart, and the underground workings could easily stretch out to a mile or more in any direction. So let's take a look at Grove Colliery itself. It was one of the largest and it was one of the last to operate, so it makes for a good case study. There's also a good number of archive photos of this operation, so you get a good idea of how it looked and how it fitted with the canal network. The pit was actually opened in 1852 on the line of the Cannock Extension Canal, and it operated for exactly 100 years, finally closing in 1952. And it ended up as one of the largest coal mining operations in the area. In addition to the coal extraction, it also had a wash plant attached to it, which was pretty unusual, and actually the wash plant carried on working for 10 years after the coal extraction came to an end. But there's so much more to this colliery than its physical appearance on the surface. I'm fascinated by the people who worked in its dark and claustrophobic tunnels, and those who worked in other pits like it. This pit had all the normal ups and downs that you'd expect of a colliery of its age. It expanded out further and further in its search for coal, but its most notable day was the 2nd of October 1930. Day when the pit encountered one of the nation's worst mining disasters. By the time it happened, the coal faces were a good mile and a half from the pit head here, and there was a service team working out on one periphery when an explosion happened, resulting in the death of 14 miners. Now, this mine was so huge that the other workers working at the pit face didn't even hear the explosion. And in spite of extensive investigations, no one is 100% sure exactly what happened. It seems likely that there was a build-up of methane gas, but what caused it to ignite is never really known. But this explosion caused the roof to come down in several places. Some of the miners were blown up in the initial blast, others were crushed by the falling rock, and the remainder were found clustered around an air supply pipe, desperately looking for some breathable air. So that brings us to the lives of the thousands of miners who worked this Cannock Coalfield. Now, to be honest, I don't know exactly how many there were, but in the 5 years after the Grove disaster, things seemed to return to a normal for the Cannock Coalfield. And as a coalfield, they reported 2,600 injuries on a typical year, about 160 of them resulting in permanent disabilities. And then, on average, about 15 to 20 deaths occurred. The very consistency of these numbers suggests a very large sample size. Now, coal mining was in no ways a glamorous activity, although the actions of the workers could at times be seen as heroic. There was danger at every turn. If the deadly methane gas didn't suffocate you, the explosions would blow you apart. If the floodwaters didn't drown you, the rockfalls could crush you and squeeze the breath from your lungs. And if you survived the perils underground, the prolonged inhalation of the coal dust was likely to result in black lung, limiting lifespan no end. Remember, this was 1928, and at the time that the Grove disaster happened, they were still trying to phase out the use of candles as a form of illumination. A primitive form of lighting indeed, when you think that this was also the age when the giant airships were ruling the skies. And by a strange twist of fate, the giant airship R101 met its demise on the very same day as the Grove disaster, somewhat overshadowing it in the news reports. Well, before we point the finger at the greedy mine owners putting profits before lives, I have to say that the business of chasing mineral deposits was fraught with peril. Just upstream from here there was the Jerome mine, owned by the parents of Jerome K. Jerome, the man of 3 men in a boat fame. Sadly, this mine wasn't a success and his parents ended up destitute. So all in all, coal mining was a precarious operation for the investors and the workers, not one that I would want to be a part of. But in a time of very limited social security, you took work where you could get it, and you hoped for the best. As we did a pirouette 400 feet up in the skies above the Grove Colliery, you'll have seen the Cannock Extension Canal stretching away to the south. So let's follow that with the drone all the way through to Pelsall Common. I'll see you at the far end. brings us to Pelsall Common, the very end of the Cannock Extension Canal and the end of this episode of Canal Hunter. Now, if you notice the drone footage being a little bit on the shaky side today, that's because of the high winds. I don't think there was any time when I was flying it that it wasn't warning me that the winds were too strong for safe flight. Anyhow, we have made it to Pelsall Common. From here we head towards Brownhills, but that is all for another day's episode. For now, cheerio and happy hunting.